If you were to decide one day that you want to explore uncharted territories, you could turn your eyes up to the skies and wonder about the possible lives on untouched planets in solar systems light years away from us. Or you could also look down, 10 kilometers under your feet, in the middle of the sea. Even if one of these distances is way shorter than the other, the floors of our oceans are almost a complete mystery to us humans. Weird glowing fish, strange transparent dwellers, and all other kind of odd-looking life is just out of reach. Scientists have estimated that we know about 5% of the fauna and flora that live this deep in the water. However, 5% is far better than 0, and what we found down there you wouldn't believe. These creatures populated legends and myth at the time and are now common monsters in fictions and video games. I'm talking about a weird phenomenon, a bizarre path of evolution in a very hostile environment. I'm talking about the Deep Sea Gigantism. So, what exactly is Deep Sea Gigantism? Well, it's been observed that animals living in the abyss tend to grow big, very big. The adult size of the species living down there can be 7, 10, or even 20 times bigger than their cousins living in shallow waters. There are many examples of this phenomenon that have been registered, but we also have to keep in mind that we know next to nothing of the extent of the strange fauna of the abyss. One of them, though, is the colossal squid. Bigger even than the giant squid, this creature fueled the nightmares of sailors for generations. They were said to take down ships in their rage with their gigantic tentacles. A fully grown colossal squid can measure up to 15 meters and weigh 700 kilograms, according to what we know of the species. Another example of this would be the isopods. You've all seen or heard about these shell-covered animals that roll themselves into little hard balls when threatened. They are usually about 10 centimeters long when they live in the sea, except, as you might have guessed, when they live in the deepest parts of the oceans. The giant isopods, as they are called, can grow up to 80 centimeters and weigh around 2 kilograms. Of course, these measurements are only made on specimens we saw, as they are hard to study. But how can any living animal grow this big? One thing I'm sure you know is that land animals never get to grow to this kind of size. There are several cons to growing huge, and we will try to get through them. Metabolism plays a major factor in it. The more there is to feed, the more you have to get food, without wasting too much energy while doing so. This is always true, on land like in the sea. Being big also means being easily noticeable, so you are more likely to be preyed upon and less likely to be able to hunt. Another massive disadvantage is the surface to volume ratio. This fancy term describes the relation between the exterior of the animal, how tall and long it is, and the whole volume of the animal. When growing in size, the surface is increasing by a power of 2, while the volume, the mass, is increasing by a power of 3. That means that the bigger the animal gets, the more support you need from their bones and muscles, which is the part of the body that allows the animal to stand and move around. With the effect of gravity, this ratio limits the mass of the being to around 100 tons, and it probably won't be possible to ever see a bigger creature than the dinosaurs of the time. But dinosaurs were still larger than our current land mammals, and it would be because of the second factor that comes with the surface to volume ratio, the ability to dissipate heat. The more surface the animal has compared to their volume, the easier it is to cool down by dissipating heat in the air around. It means that an animal too big would overheat by not being able to cool down fast enough. Dinosaurs, being probably cold-blooded, did not have this issue. However, creatures in the oceans, and even more in the abyss, do not play by the same set of rules, and we will see how those cons are bypassed. Regarding the surface-to-volume ratio, I said that its limitation is mostly due to gravity. Thanks to the buoyancy of the oceans, the animals in the water don't fight against gravity. You would think that, even then, the living being in the abyss still have to fight against the immense pressure exerted by the water around them. It is not the case, as they are themselves mostly made of water. Therefore, their growth isn't stunted by gravity, nor pressure. The other side of the surface-to-volume ratio, the conservation of energy that prevents land and shallow waters animals from growing big, becomes in the deep waters an advantage in the face of selection. In a colder environment, you want to retain heat as much as possible to stay within your body's limits. With no lights from the sun and almost nothing getting down to the ocean floor, the water is slightly above 0 degrees, which qualifies as quite cold. This is called the Bergman's rule, and it is also easily noticeable looking at the animals from the poles. This conservation of energy also means that bigger animals are more efficient, and while being bigger means that their metabolism rate is big, the conservation of heat is more important in the abyss. Being efficient and not dissipating is no longer life-threatening, but life-saving. The cold also slows down their metabolic rate, as if they were living in slow motion. The necessity for food to sustain themselves is still real, but the abyss dwellers eat what is called marine snow. This is organic matter from dead creatures and other debris falling from above. No need to hunt, then, but it also means that the resources are rare. Where land animals would spend energy finding food to run from other animals and heat their body or cool it down, the abyss animals just have to maintain their heat. To dig a little deeper in the subject of the Deep Sea Gigantism, I invited a soon-to-be doctorate on deep sea arthropods. Christophe, thank you for accepting my invitation.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Would you like to tell us a little about your thesis, or is that too complicated for the common people?
Well, yeah, it's kind of long to explain. Basically, I work on deep sea adaptations for arthropods.
Thank you very much. I have another personal question to start this little Q&A. What is your favorite example of deep sea gigantism, or the most fascinating one to you?
Well, obviously there are many examples that comes to mind. You talked about them quite a bit, but my favorite has to be Pyrondelia gigas, which is an amphipod, so that is to say cousin to the Gamarus you can see in freshwater. But it's bone white, it has no eyes, and most importantly here, it is about 25 centimeters long, which makes it more than 20 times larger than its surface relatives. And why it is fascinating to me is that because it lives really deep into our ocean, like 10 kilometers deep, and that deep, it's below chemical threshold of the solidification for calcite carbonate, which is the main component for the arthropod shell, which means that below these thresholds, there shouldn't be any arthropod with an hard shell, but there is Pyrondelia gigas. So why can it survive here? Well, the answer is that its carapace is reinforced with aluminium, meaning that it can hold a solid state even 100 meters down below the surface.
Okay. Okay, very, very interesting. Um, and how would you say we should go and learn more about the ocean floor in general and deep sea gigantism? How is the research done to catalog the species that are part of this phenomenon, or just in general?
For that, there are many deep sea wolves that are regularly dispatched in the sea in order to try to learn more about our oceans by filming it. Of course, the task is really big, and knowing fully our oceans isn't scheduled for tomorrow. But often enough, there are some pretty interesting surprises that are caught on camera. And the neat thing about it is that you can check some of those videos on YouTube because some institutes, like the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, do post those videos on their YouTube channel.
That's very interesting resources. I can only encourage you to check them out if you would like to learn more about the subject. So, do you think this kind of natural adaptation could be uh, observed elsewhere in like similar circumstances, I'm guessing?
Yes, indeed. Gigantism is also observed on land with the example of the island rule, which is when an animal that is known to live on an island is bigger, tend to be bigger than its continental counterpart. And the explanation behind that is that on the island, um, they live without the pressure of predation, which means they can grow bigger. But it's pretty different from deep sea gigantism because the island rule also come with another tendency where the animals tend to be smaller than the ones on the continent because of the limitation on resources that is imposed by small islands. Another example of land on land was during the Carboniferous, so a period of time that was about 350 million years ago, where that was pretty notorious for their really giant bugs. And this one is explained by the fact that it's supposed that the atmosphere were really rich in oxygen, much richer than what we have now.
So it does exist on land as well, but in different circumstances because of isolation and resources and lack of predation. Thank you very much. What other kind of adaptation, really quickly to finish this, what other kind of adaptation can we see on the creatures of the abyss that have gigantism or that fits the criteria for gigantism?
Well, while it's not linked to the abyss, especially, there is a tendency to giant sea dwellers to live on filter feeding, and that is the most notorious examples of that are the whale shark and the baleen whales in general. And the explanation behind that is that filter feeding for animals this big is the most efficient, energy-wise, way of feeding. And my favorite part about this fact is that there was a long time ago during the Ordovician an animal called Aegirocassis, which was 2 meter long filter feeding arthropod. And it might not seem that big, but 2 meter long means it was the biggest animal at the time, and it was a, filting, a, fil, fil, a filter feeder.
Thank you very much. Um, it was very interesting, and I'm really glad you came, Christophe. and we wish you all the best for your thesis.
Thank you, and thanks again for having me.
From what we learned about this path of evolution, we could wonder, wouldn't that mean that if predators were able to swim this deep, the local fauna would be at a severe disadvantage, as there is none down there? It would, but it can't happen, as these places are isolated, cut from the rest of the oceans because of the difference of temperature. Or are they? The most important danger of them all is, as always, us. Even if I said that we did not explore most of the abyss, it doesn't mean that our actions don't have any repercussion far from us. Global warming may cause the rise of the oceans, but it also implies that the immense bodies of water are warming up. A slight change in temperature could tip the balance off and shatter the delicate intrication of species that makes this ecosystem up. By our lack of reaction, we could be driving the giants of the abyss extinct before even meeting them.